All right, welcome to the Resilient Performance Podcast. This is Keep It Real number 24. We're going to dive into recovery, readiness as a topic for today. So, Trevor, Doug, one of you guys want to take it and run?
Yeah, since I'm the curmudgeon, I can get it started, and then we can kind of we can go from there.
Public enemy number one.
Um, no, I think the impetus for this one is, we had posted something about icing, and as with a lot of the social media stuff, I feel like there's times where we put out things that are much more like thoughtful and insightful, and it gets zero engagement. Then you talk about icing, and it's the most engaging post that we've had for a while. And what we talked about was, you know, I think the paradigm shift with icing was that initially it was like icing is this great thing. It increases healing, decreases swelling, and if you're recovering from an injury, you have to ice. It should be a part of the just the standard of care. And that's kind of switched to, I think now the pendulum's gone the other way, where you're hearing ice interferes with healing because it, minimizes the inflammatory response. You need inflammation for tissue healing. Um, and so I kind of want to reconcile those two things, because I think it is pretty clear that if you're not icing, you're not like sabotaging your recovery from an injury. Like, I don't know if there's great evidence, great research to support that you like icing needs to be part of a comprehensive plan of care and that it promotes healing. I think that the body probably evolved over time to heal pretty well without ice. And, you know, maybe too much swelling needs to be controlled if it prevents movement. But I mean, if we could wave a magic wand and get rid of all swelling in the body, at least for, an acute injury or coming off a surgery, like there's probably a reason why swelling occurs. So we don't want to eliminate that. There could be reasons why you want to control it. And icing was always, considered a means to that end, to minimize swelling. But presumably, if you overdo it, it can actually delay healing. But my question was, in one of our tweets, was that, because now everything's become so anti-icing, where people are saying, athletes are sabotaging their recovery because they're icing, they're delaying, or they're delaying tissue healing. And I'm curious, like, how much icing does one have to do to actually compromise tissue healing? I kind of look at icing like I do a lot of other things, where I feel like it probably doesn't make that much difference one way or the other. And I think that, if we're going to take a hard line stance and say, like, icing, we shouldn't ice as part of a comprehensive recovery plan, is it accurate to say that, like, athletes who, let's say, for example, put an ice pack on their knee for 10, 20 minutes a night, but they're sabotaging their recovery? I don't know if that's true either. I don't know if there's great research to show, and a lot of research is very contextual, right? Like, so are we also misleading our athletes if we say, look, anytime you put an ice pack on the body, you're hindering yourself? I don't know if we can say that either. So it's like,
No.
what's a middle ground when it comes to icing or for recovery? And just to be transparent, like, in New York, we don't have an ice pack in our clinic. We don't have any ice machine. I don't think we do in New Jersey either. So if we're really emotionally and clinically invested in icing, we would have people ice. So all I can speak to is what I have, when an athlete asks me, should I be icing? Because they have an hour with us, right? So I kind of look at everything as, I look at everything as, what you have in your clinic is a reflection of your priorities. So clearly, if icing was a big priority of ours, we would have ice machines or ice packs. We don't have that. But oftentimes an athlete will ask, what do you think about icing? And I'll say, well, look, I don't think you need to do it, but if you do it and you feel like it helps you and you get some relief, I think there is, you do get some pain relief and some anesthesia from it. And so, for example, if, we want you to do something that's a little bit more active and you put an ice pack on for 5 minutes, and that's going to help you psychologically or physically be able to do something more active that we think is going to help you more, then I'll tell them to do it. So I'll say, look, unless you're not like overdoing it where you've got an ice pack on for hours at a time, if you want to do it, you can. But if not, don't feel like you're sabotaging yourself and your progress if you don't do it. So I think that icing is kind of a microcosm for recovery as a whole. And we can speak to the overarching umbrella of recovery after we talk about icing. But so before you guys take over, I guess I would say, for me, icing is one of those things where I'm like, if you want to do it cool, I don't think it matters that much one way or the other. And I probably don't think that we can accurately say that for the amount of time that athletes, especially on their own, do devote to icing, that they're totally compromising their inflammatory response and their tissue healing. I just don't. I think that's probably more theoretical. I wonder, and maybe there's a listener who's doing research in this area. I wonder, like, how much icing it actually takes to truly interfere with recovery. And I think that if we're going to send athletes messages that are alarming, like don't do this, we need to be careful because we don't want to create kind of kind of a pendulum shift too far in one direction or the other.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, to hop in, I always think too about like with any of these recovery things in general, including ice or heat or stim or whatever, it's like, how truly powerful is it actually? Like, is it really gonna like completely destroy your ability to heal and recover and be ready for your next like bout of performance? Like, is an ice pack going to do that to you if you put it on for 20, 30, 40, like a couple times a day for 20 minutes? Like, I just don't think there's anything really that powerful that we're talking about right now. We're not talking about like medications where you're like actually messing with like cellular biology and hormones and stuff like that. Like, this is some simple stuff that like anybody can, like some kid can go to his freezer and grab some ice and throw it in his body. It's not going to like hurt him. So in general, I'm just thinking like, all right, like how powerful is this really? I would say probably not really so powerful. Um, and then just in terms of like what kind of recommendations I give for stuff, I almost like often forget about it, like in general, until someone asks. But the times that I actually do think about it clinically are when there's actually like active inflammation, maybe after a surgery or something, or after something traumatic where it's like, like it's actually inflamed and there's like an increased amount of fluid. And then it's like, people will argue like, well, you don't want to like hinder the inflammatory response like you're talking about, Doug. And again, it's like, is if this ice pack for 20 minutes is going to truly like destroy this person's ability to recover from a traumatic injury or a surgical procedure, like what am I even doing? Like, it's kind of ridiculous to jump to that extreme and swing the pendulum that far, like you're talking about. And also think about too, like you said, people they like want things to do on their own often. They want to feel like they have some sort of level of control.
Yeah, good point.
No, they probably don't. And like how much can we truly actually change an inflammatory process that's very natural? There's normal like tissue healing timelines for these things in textbooks. And um, like I just don't know how much we're going to alter that. So if somebody is like, I want something to do at home besides like some of these simple exercises you've done because I'm in this acute phase, like, can I ice? It's like, yeah, go for it. Like, you're not going to hurt yourself. And that's usually a similar answer to what you said earlier would be, do you like icing? Like, have you tried it? Yes or no? And if they have and they liked it, and it's like, yeah, go for it. I kind of don't really think it's that powerful that we really need to be telling somebody it's the most dangerous thing to do. But then again, like if you're talking about heating and you're throwing heat on like inflammation, I'm not cool with that. So like, and again, like that's probably still not going to really like destroy somebody. But at the same time, it's like, that's not like the theory isn't behind it that that would be helpful at all to throw some heat on some inflammation. So that just doesn't make sense. And then I think that's all I really had to say about ice.
I think your like emotional kind of relationship to it is really important to kind of consider. Like so many athletes, or I've always said, I don't think it's even the athlete, it's like the parent of the athlete that we work with will be like, well, should my kid be icing? And it's like, if they have been, yeah, keep doing it. That's fine. If they haven't been, I'm like, then don't worry about it. Unless there is like these kind of like the swollen joint that's going on. Like one thing that comes to mind is I had a basketball player who was 7 feet tall. He was very far post-op from his initial surgery, but like every time he played basketball, like his knee would kind of swell up like a fair amount. And he sent him back to the doctor. The doctor's like, look, nothing's wrong. Like he gave him some meloxicam and some other kind of help with the swelling. He's like, yeah, just like wrap it up with some ice on it, and like it'll eventually just kind of go away. Because like, was the ice what was going to fix his knee? No, but it psychologically like made the kid feel better. And I think from like a joint, a local pathology standpoint, like yeah, there's probably a little bit of excessive inflammation. So maybe slapping some ice on that thing like did help that on a very small level, but ultimately like it made the kid emotionally feel better. Like he's being proactive and taking care of himself, which just makes him feel better and gives him more confidence going into the next day when his knee feels a little bit better.
Trevor sounds like he's an official because he's out recovering right now like a superhero and taking a walk around the building. Just so you know.
Yeah, I'm outside getting my earth recovery on.
Yeah, it's just I think it's just as professionals, like anytime someone makes an alarming statement, like if you do this, something is terrible is going to happen. I would just caution us because this is, I mean, we see this all the time where we do something traditionally that probably is not that accurate, and instead of just saying this isn't accurate and taking like kind of a moderate position, we feel like we have to go to the other extreme to swing the pendulum to the middle. And I think most people are smart enough that like, why don't we just take a moderate stance on it? Because I mean, it's not a totally clean analogy, but if you look at like drinking water, like we need water to survive. We don't need to put an ice pack on our body to survive. But you could say, and without context, say like drinking water can kill you. Water is toxic because you can drink enough water to become hyponatremic and die. It's happened in military basic training and some other places, and even in endurance races where people drink too much water with no electrolytes. Like it's theoretically possible to die from drinking too much water. But is that really an accurate message to say that water is toxic? So again, are most people drinking enough water to kill themselves? Are most people icing enough to totally compromise healing? I think the answer to that is probably not. But we should try to. I think, you know, what Trevor said, where if people have traditionally done it and they like it and they feel good and they're not doing it for more than, like, let's say, you know, 10 to 15 minutes, it's probably fine. Now, I think we should still educate them that, like, look, part of the reason why they probably are icing in the first place and think they're getting a benefit is because they have been conditioned to think that it's doing something that it's not. So as long as we educate them and say, like, look, just, it's not this magical thing one way or the other, but if you feel good when you do it and allows you to do the things that we actually think are more important, like moving and strengthening and all those other things that are more like active components of rehab, then do it. And I think one of the definitive resources for this subject is Christy Ashwanden's book, Good to Go. We've had her on the podcast. We go into more depth in that episode on recovery. And she takes kind of like a libertarian view on recovery, where it's like, look, most of this stuff is not really that powerful. So there is a lot of placebo and emotional and contextual factors when it comes to recovery and performance, and how people feel really is important, even though we don't want to acknowledge it because we as the professionals can't like control it so much. I think that's a good default position to have, as long as there isn't a huge downside to doing something. But, you know, the flip side of that is I think there is this huge, and speaking more broadly about recovery, this whole like recovery industrial complex, where recovery has become this thing where there's so many now, and it's more marketing driven, so many components to it. And it's like, it's marketed that if you're not like doing cold water immersion every day, and you're not, you know, taking vibration tools and putting them on your body, and you're not doing this, and you're not doing that, that like, you can't be a complete athlete. And I just kind of look at, again, I'm not saying this is the right answer. This is just how I think. I don't use absolutes often, but I've never had an athlete that I've worked with where I've been like, you know what, the limiting factor, or this athlete needs to get into a cold tub however many days a week to get a better outcome. Like I've never thought like, I want this athlete to go into freezing water, you know? So if I'm going to ask an athlete to do something, whether it's their time or their discomfort, right? Because like, it's uncomfortable as hell to get into an ice bath. Like I better be damn sure that it's going to do something. And, you know, I'm not saying people shouldn't do it. And if you like it, do it. But I haven't had somebody where I've been like, you know what, if they ice their body more, if they did more cold water immersion, if they did more sensory deprivation, if they did more vibration tools to their body, like all those things are fine if you want to do it. But again, all I can speak to is like, what do I actually do when my reputation is on the line? I haven't told someone they have to do those things. I kind of defer to them, and I'm like, look, the things that I think are really important, I'm prioritizing, we're doing here, I'm programming it out for you. If you want to do other things and you think that it helps, as long as you're not doing it excessively, it's not going to hurt you, and it might help you. And if it helps you, I don't know the reason why. Maybe it's placebo, but I am not above an athlete using the placebo effect to perform better. But I try to educate them on like, you don't need to do these things to excel, because they probably don't make that much of a difference. And from a recovery standpoint, if you're so neurotic about it that you feel like on your quote unquote day off, you have to do 20 different things and put yourself through this, you know, torment yourself in an ice bath, then I don't even know if that's helping you recover. So when it comes to recovery, I would say get a good night's sleep, eat a meal with someone that you enjoy. There's ways to get parasympathetic with your partner that are probably more fun than going in an ice bath. Maybe we should recommend doing more of that if it's accessible to you. Like, I'm not even joking, because that probably is going to help you recover more than so.
For sure.
That's the stuff that is already a part of your life. But if it feels too rehearsed and too contrived and too much of an itinerary, and it becomes another thing to do, then I don't know how much it's helping recovery.
Yeah, it's like maybe then, like, if you need to do 13 different things, like, you probably, like, maybe your workload's too much. Like, maybe you need to be doing less of other stuff.
Right.
You have this psychological attachment or emotional attachment, like, oh, I didn't foam roll today, or I didn't do this today, so I'm just going to be a complete shithead in the gym and like fall apart. Like, it's just not that. Yeah, there's something else that's the limiting factor. It's less about the actual recovery then at that point.
Yeah, I think like we always talk about like big rocks and low hanging fruit, and like you just mentioned the two, Doug. It's like when I have somebody ask me about, should I be doing this? Should I be foam rolling, using a massage gun, taking an ice bath, whatever? It's like, yeah, if you want to, because again, I'm like, I really just don't care all that much. Like, I don't think it's that important. If you want to, if you have the free time, if you like it, go for it. But it's like, you ask the two big questions. It's like, are you sleeping well? Are you eating enough? Are you eating good food? Are you are you doing some things outside of like training and your sport that you enjoy? It's like, if you're not doing those things, let's focus on those parts of your life first to maximize recovery. And then again, you still want to foam roll, for 2 hours a day and use voodoo bands and use massage guns, like, go for it. But let's ultimately get the big rocks, get the low hanging fruit first, and then we can take things from there.
And then I always just think about like you hear all these stories about like old school athletes who, like, yeah, they're probably icing their knees, but then they're also probably drinking like 30 beers after like a football game on a weekend. It's like, that's probably not helping their inflammation. So like, what are we actually doing here?
Yeah, I mean, you got finite time, so like, what's really important? And I think a lot of times as professionals, like, we want to be the reasons that athletes succeed. So we make them busybodies, and we want to control everything. And it's hard sometimes just be like, you know what, like, there's no structured training today. Just do whatever you want. And even the whole phrase like active recovery, like, if you're really active and you're doing something that's like truly structured and planned, how much is it helping your recovery? So even like runners talk about like, I'm doing a recovery run, but if you're doing like a really like low intensity, long duration run, it's also helping you develop an adaptation. Like, you're getting an adaptation from that. So maybe you're recovering in the sense that you're not doing something that's very high intensity, but I don't know, like, just call it what it is. Like, you're training, and you're maybe, because it's low intensity, you actually are recovering enough to do something high intensity the next day. But let's not act like it's the same thing as doing nothing, because for the most part, doing nothing that's your recovery. If you're doing something, like, it isn't necessarily recovery. It might still have value because you're getting an adaptation. In this case, you're getting, whatever, like eccentric hypertrophy of the left ventricle by doing a low intensity cardiac output type protocol. But like, we like to use these euphemisms to disguise like training, and we're calling it like active recovery. It's like, and you see sometimes teams where they want to have a recovery day, like in college, and like the day after a game, when, what do college athletes do, especially if they're not traveling the day after the night of a game? Like, they go out, they stay out late, they party. And so it's like, we're going to have a recovery day at 7 a.m. and we're just going to sit there and like, we're going to foam roll and talk to each other, when they probably be better off just sleeping off their hangover, like, so we want to like control everything, but you can't control everything. I think if you give athletes a little bit more autonomy, like, they'll probably self-regulate, and we don't need to make them busybodies all the times and like have everything, including their recovery, so structured. That said, I think it's still important to educate them about like, look, if you want to foam roll on your own, you can, but when you do foam roll, I'll ask them like, what have you heard, or what do you think foam rolling is doing? And if they say, well, like, I heard that it breaks up scar tissue, I'll say like, look, that's actually not what it's doing. Here's kind of what we know about it and what we don't know. If after that you still feel like you want to do it because you just like how it makes you feel, go ahead and do it. But I think a lot of times athletes do some things because they have been improperly educated. So as long as you kind of reset that and you give them, a better frame of reference for what they're doing, if they still choose to do it, let them do it. But we don't need to control every aspect and micromanage their, even their off days.
And they're probably like the biggest, I mean, what's the best recovery tool? It's sleeping, right? Like, you're going to have all these amazing processes happen in your body that are going to be the most beneficial. Like, beyond that, eat some good meals, drink some water, and like replenish through like nutrition, and like Trevor was saying, you guys were saying, it's like, if you need to do anything else on top of that, go for it, because it's probably mostly psychological and just makes you feel like you're doing something for that day.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember watching even what was it, like Last Chance U, when they show these guys after practice just going in the ice bath, and like the guys who didn't want to do it, they were kind of being, like castigated, and like they're called soft. It's like I mean, and you have to ask yourself again, what is this really achieving? Like, I don't know if doing something that is going to elicit that much of a stress response, because look, like certain people have better tolerance to cold water. If you're the kind of person that just hates going in it and it evokes this huge stress response, like, is it really helping you to recover? Right. So, again, we always want to feel like we're controlling every aspect of the process. And it's the whole, like, we've taken the grind mentality of outworking people and applied it to recovery. Like, you've got to out recover your opponent. And that to me is just so antithetical to what recovery is. Like, if you feel like you have to outwork somebody in your recovery, then I think you've kind of like lost sight of what the goal is.
I like that point a lot, Doug, because I think like when I see athletes who are doing that's like they're sacrificing their number one source of recovery, which is sleep, to go do the stuff that probably doesn't matter like whatsoever. Like sleep can replenish you like, 95%. Maybe these other modalities give you like 1%, and they're sacrificing the majority of the best thing that they can get, which is sleep. And they're spending hours and hours and hours doing these things that really just like don't matter from a physiologic recovery side of things. It's like it's really not impacting you like whatsoever. Your nervous system is still fried. You're still sore as hell. You're still super fatigued because you're trying to go do all this stuff instead of just like getting a good night of sleep and going to bed on time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that a lot of times we romanticize athletes who are just always thinking about like, how do I get better? Like every second of the day I'm getting better. You can't be getting better every second of the day. And if you're constantly thinking about like, how can I be improving? How can I be kind of like training when I'm not training? I think that, we should romanticize athletes who have an off switch, and who can like, they go hard when they have to go hard, and they're professional when they have to be, but they also like have some things in their life outside of sport that allow them to relax and step away from the game. Because it's like we do with other professions, like, oh, I work 100 hours a week. Like, you're not being productive 100 hours a week. So you might be at an office chained to your desk because your boss isn't going to let you leave, but that's not like you're not working and being productive. And similarly, like, you don't need to think, if you're an athlete or a coach, about like, even on Sunday when we're not practicing with the team, like, here's a list of assignments that you can do to make yourself better. It's like, I think that if they're not thinking about training and competing, that probably has as much or more benefit than us giving them stuff to do. So I think people just need to just chill.
Yeah, just chill, keep it real.
Figuratively, not chill too much being cold unless you want to.
Yeah. If you're not threatened by that, that's
right.
Anything else, or we're gonna wrap it up here? Cool. Yeah. So Trevor's our new return to sports acceleration agility course has been out for a couple weeks at this point. Having some good feedback from that. So hopefully we see more people hopping into that thing, and then we got our virtual professional development mentorship program coming up. There's an opt-in for that on the website to just kind of learn about it and set up a call, talk about it, hear more about it. Hoping to set some of those calls up probably actually the week that this podcast goes out. But we're excited for that as well. And
then what's the promo code? What's the promo code for the course, Greg?
Promo code for the course? We just have podcasts. Yeah, promo code podcast, get 10% off of actually anything on our website, any of the professional development resources. We got our exercise database back up and running on the new platform, so that's cool. But keep it real, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Resilient Performance Podcast. As a thank you for listening, please use promo code PODCAST for 10% off our professional development resources at resilientperformance.com. Also, make sure to sign up for our mailing list to receive exclusive content and promotions.